The Meaning of Your Life by Arthur C. Brooks. This is the latest book by this author. I've read a couple of his now. The previous one that I read was called From Strength to Strength, and then he co-wrote a book with Oprah called Build the Life You Want, and I actually did like that book too. He's in the kind of self-help book category, so a little bit about him. I think he's a professor at Harvard Business School and the Harvard Kennedy School. He's become pretty popular over the years with his writings and speaking engagements, things like that. Anyway, this book here is Finding Purpose in an Age of Emptiness. So what it's about essentially is he's being a professor. Like a lot of these, you kind of read stories like these a lot today where professors, especially on these big college campuses, especially ones like Harvard, are starting to see things in their students that don't match their own experience when they grew up and when they were in school, which is essentially that they're all unhappy. They're all depressed, sad, and I don't mean literally all, but most. There's just like a pretty big cognitive dissonance with people, kids today, especially in that like 20-ish range, where life should be so much better than it was for the professors that are teaching them. However, it's not. And that's kind of what he has set out to explore here. He talks a lot about, his passion is happiness. That's what he writes about a lot. And so he's trying to figure out like what's missing. And he dives into that with this book. And essentially the idea is fairly obvious with the title, right? People are missing meaning in their life. And that is something that I can say that I have experienced as well, not only personally, but just like with kids these days, is it just seems like people growing up now are sort of void of any purpose. And there are a number of reasons for that. He doesn't get into the reasons a ton in this book. And what I mean by that is like, in my opinion, I think he kind of goes into the micro reasons more than the macro ones. I think there are bigger picture things that he could have spent more time on in this book. But where I kind of didn't enjoy it as much as I was expecting to is that this is more of like a guide on how to find meaning. And what I like more with self-help books is when, hey, just lay out the problem for me. Outline the problem. How did we get here? And then let me try to kind of figure out what I want to do about that. When you get into these books that are trying to guide you on how to solve the problem, one, it's not as fun of a read. And two, in my opinion, it's a bit presumptuous because a lot of times the person writing it has never actually had that experience. And so I would just rather, hey, you're a professor, you see this, you have tons of access to data and studies. Let's just spend time on the problem. And that to me would have been a more interesting book in the sense of let's just spend time talking about why is there such a void of meaning in people's lives today. And not to say that he doesn't do some of that, but it just turns into like every chapter is like a guide on how to fix X, whatever the outline of the chapter is. And so not what I would have preferred. There are some good parts of it for sure. One of the things that I like about Arthur Brooks is that he's kind of more into the Eastern philosophy than Western philosophy, like the more sort of like Buddhist teachings, Buddhist practices. And what I like about that a lot is when you get into more Eastern philosophies versus Western, Eastern is more about sort of like you take something and you break it down and what's left reveals the true person of who you are. Like, I think a lot of this is like how we grow up today. I think this is actually one of the problems with Western culture is that we're always trying to add things on. Oh, we need this, add that, add more. You're missing this, add that to your life. A lot of times it's stripping those things away. And I think that is one of the more common problems with kids today is that more, and especially in the West. We need more things. We need to spend more money. We need to acquire more stuff. And Eastern philosophy is more about stripping all those things away and sort of getting to the core of who you were as a child, right? And he goes into some of that stuff, and I like that. That's one of the things that I enjoy about him. I do find him to be a better speaker. I enjoy him more on podcasts than I do in books. This is another common thing I see with authors where they're not as good of writers as they are speakers, and those are very different things. So Anyway, I did write down a quote that I wanted to share because it is something that I liked in, again, it goes with what I was just talking about. So he's talking, and this is when they're going through like suffering, talking about suffering in life and why suffering is important. This tracks with the Buddhist concept that suffering equals resistance times pain, which implies that non-resistance is the beginning of effective treatment to reduce suffering. This is also like that right there is a core problem I also see with Western philosophy, in particular with kids, particularly with college kids, where they resist suffering. And he talks about this in the book where we're so, especially on these college campuses, these major liberal ones, where they're so afraid of offending people, or they don't want to trigger anything or say offensive things that were never offensive when we were growing up. And that's just a kind of a microcosm of the larger problem that we sort of try to resist suffering as opposed to embracing suffering and saying, hey, this is what's going to mold me. I loved that suffering equals resistance times pain. Like the more you resist it and the higher the pain is, the worse it's going to be. And then non-resistance is in fact the way through it. It's kind of like, like the Ryan Holiday talks about this in some of his books, where it's like sometimes the answer to the problem is to go right through the problem, right? And I think that's what that sentence kind of meant to me. And so acceptance of, okay, this is a problem. I'm going to control what I can control. And at the end of the day, the things that I can't control, I'll deal with them, whatever the outcome may be. And I like that, something that tracks with my life as well. So, cool quote. Yeah, that's the book here, The Meaning of Your Life by Arthur C. Brooks. I wouldn't say it's a pass, but it's not what I was expecting. I think if you haven't read a lot of self-help books, this could be a good one for you. But if you've read a lot of the stuff, like some the Mark Manson's type of stuff, I don't know that there's a lot of new stuff in here. So I just think for you kind of have to think about it. One thing that it made me think a lot of, because this book was a lot about like dealing with change. There's a really good book called Life is in the Transitions by Bruce Feiler. I'd probably read that before this if I was dealing with big transitions, big health problems, big job change, like either I might lose my job or I'm potentially thinking about it. Like I would say check that book out before this one. So anyway, that's the book. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. I do lots of book reviews. I appreciate you watching.